All right. Well, hi, hello, and welcome to AppSec Wizardry, getting shift left in gear for your developers. Now, today's exciting webinar is sponsored by Harness and Wiz and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Jess Steinbach. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I'm so happy that I get to be your moderator today because A, I find AppSec absolutely fascinating, and B, who doesn't love a good session on wizardry, right? And this brings me to my first and most important question for all of you. I need to know, when I say wizardry, are you immediately picturing, no wrong answers here, Gandalf, Harry Potter, or Merlin? Or who's your go-to wizard of choice? Shout it out. Put it in the questions window. I want to know who is role modeling wizardry for you in your mind. And whoever you choose, get ready to add another name to that roster of wizards because we have two top experts here with us today who are going to walk us through the magical world of AppSec. We are going to talk about key trends and best practices around how to increase speed in a complex environment without, and this is very important, sacrificing your developers or burning them out. So truly a magical day ahead of us. I cannot wait to dive in. So I'm going to start out with just a few housekeeping points to help you get the most out of our time here together today, and then we will get this show on the road. All right, let's start with a little guided tour of your audience console. We're going to tour around together. And the place that I want to start out is in that questions window, because this is the best place to get involved, to get interactive. We have two incredible speakers here with us today who want to hear from you. They want your insightful questions, your comments, your feedback. They want to know your thoughts on wizards, or maybe I just want to know that. We have a lot planned for all of you today. We have a lot to get into. So give that questions tab a trial run right now. Say hi, say hello. Let us know how you're doing. Give us a wave out here in the community. I see Richard, I see John, hey Vrej, hey Zhang. I saw Gilbert signing in earlier and Rakesh. We've got Robert, the whole awesome crew. Keep those highs and hellos coming. I want to hear from you as we go throughout our day today. Now, a quick side note. Hi, Michael. Howdy on back. Quick side note that questions window is also the best place to reach out if you do have any technical issues. Now, the very first thing you're going to try that should solve most of the usual problems is a browser refresh. So try a browser refresh first if anything comes up. If that doesn't work for you, you can post a message in that questions window and our crew will be there to help you out. All right, so we were hanging out in the questions window. We're going to go one tab over because I want to spend some time in the handouts tab. We have some awesome resources and cool takeaways for you, so be sure that you spend some time there. There's a really cool event we're going to tell you about later that you can register for, so make sure you've got those tabs open, but don't go too far away from us yet because we have a whole lot of good stuff coming at you, but I promise you'll want to spend a little time exploring that before you head out of the webinar today. We also have a $250 Amazon gift card that we'll be giving away as a prize drawing at the end of our webinar. Now, you do need to be here in live attendance in order to qualify to win that prize, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Ooh. If you are not sure what those conditions are, no problem. Head back over to that handouts tab that we were just chatting about, click in, and if you go all the way down to the bottom there, you can find the full T's and C's waiting for you. All right, now I'm sure with the crew of people that we have here today, I don't need to give you too much incentive to ask questions, but hey, a little extra prize is always great, right? So we have a $50 Amazon gift card that we will be giving away to the best question asked. The best question asked. Now, here's the cool part about it. We review all of the questions asked after we wrap up the webinar. So we will do our best to get to all of our questions today live. But even if we do not get to your question in our live Q&A session, you are still entered to win just by getting that question in. So make sure you've got those fingers limbered up, stretch it out right now, get the brain active and ready to go, and get those questions in as we go throughout our day together today. All right, well, that was it. We covered a lot of information very quickly, and I don't know about you guys, but I am pumped up and ready to jump into our session today because, boy, do we have a treat in store for all of you, and I am going to bring our wonderful expert presenters on out here with me now. I am so happy to introduce you all to Sean Roth, Director of Product Marketing at Harness, and Shashank Gola, Product Marketing Manager Integrations at Wiz. Sean and Shashank, thank you so much for being here with us today. I know we have a ton of stuff to cover, so I'm going to hand things on over to you, Sean. Take it away.
All right, Jess, thank you so much. That was an incredible intro. We don't have any overt references to Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter, but in the spirit of wizardry and magic, I think there's some interesting nuggets and perspectives that we're going to share with you that hopefully will, add a little magic to your security practices when it comes to the software delivery lifecycle. So a quick intro for myself. I'm Director of Product Marketing here at Harness, and my area of responsibility is our secure software delivery products. That includes our shift left security module called STO, and also our supply chain security solution. Shashank, you want to give an intro of yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Sean. My name is Shashank. I'm a product marketer over at Wiz. I support all of the integrations that we have. So we have over 100 integrations, and one of our closest partners is Harness on the CI/CD side. And I think part of my background includes being a software engineer kind of earlier on in my career. So I'm really excited to kind of be here talking about the shift left movement, talking about how security can help developers in the shift left movement. And I think with the theme of magic, I think if somebody was to give me a magic wand when I was a developer, one of the things I would definitely wish for is I wish security could just happen without it slowing down how I'm developing. So I think one of the goals of what we're talking about today is to think about how can we embed security into developer workflows without making it a huge headache or a huge overhead for them. So really excited for the talk.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. In that case, let's dive right in.
Let's go.
And there we go. All right. So, as Jess mentioned, the title of our webinar today is AppSec Wizardry. We're going to talk about shift left security, but really from the standpoint of, how do you make this work in ways that work for your developers? One of the things I wanted to, to bring up as part of our intro, how did Shashank and I sort of come together and put this material together? Our perspectives really align through the partnership between Harness and Wiz, focused on, how do we create a kind of a best-in-class shift left security solution for developers, and given sort of when you consider the pace of developing modern applications today, security is in many cases just sort of running to catch up. And there are a whole variety of approaches that have needed to change in the world of modern applications. And so shift left sort of, came through the whole rise of DevSecOps as a practice. So we're going to get into some of the specifics here. We'll take a look at the shift left security methodology. What are some of the challenges that we often hear from our customers, and sort of what are the perspectives of developers as they're trying to do what they do in a highly productive and really fast-paced manner, but dealing with the added burden of having to create more secure code and deal with vulnerabilities as they come. And then, beyond just the build and deploy kind of phases of the software development lifecycle, how do you look at shift left security from the standpoint of an application running in the cloud? And that's really where Shashank is going to bring his expertise and perspective and talk about it there. So I think, looking at software as it's developed and how to better integrate and move security practices further to the left, pairs really well with the perspective of, okay, now I've got a production application running in the cloud. What are some of the, what are the things that I'm doing earlier on in the development lifecycle that are going to give me an advantage when it comes to looking at, security issues with a running application. We'll then take a brief look at the integration that we've built between Harness STO, which is our security testing orchestration module, and Wiz CLI. All right, so let's get into the meat of it. So, just to level set here, what I'm showing is a conceptual map of the software development lifecycle here, just in a couple of primary phases here. Some of the issues with traditional application security are made glaringly obvious. So, in the world of modern applications, let's say you're building containerized applications, or you have an app based on microservices, for example. This is sort of the mainstream today. Obviously, there are real issues with waiting until the end, until you're almost ready to deploy your application to test it for vulnerabilities, and to have security sort of factored in more as a bolt-on versus a a seamlessly integrated set of tools, technologies, and practices. And typically what happens here when you delay all of your security testing and practices to the end is that you're just getting ready to deploy an application. Then all of a sudden your security team comes in with a whole slew of vulnerabilities that are found in a later development stage, and then tosses it back to the software development team to go and resolve. And so, think of just, having to really hustle to get something out the door, and all of a sudden your release timeline gets blown up. There's a very big chance that you're going to miss your production deadline, because now you've got to stop everything that you're doing and context switch over to sorting through a whole pile of unprocessed scanner output to figure out which vulnerabilities do I need to fix, which are the most critical. And so developers often get burned out having to, sift through the scanner output and figure that out, and resolve those vulnerabilities on their own. So there's a huge amount of toil that's created for a developer who, it's no surprise their primary job is to build great software. So that kind of takes them off that track. So these are the issues that typically come up, and really drives at the notion that security needs to be rethought for modern applications. So shifting security left, you've probably heard this phrase dozens of times, and this is what's kind of like top of mind when it comes to application security testing these days. And of course, DevSecOps, the confluence of software development, DevOps, and security working together in a way to integrate security in a seamless fashion throughout the pipeline, or at least, that's more of the, kind of the marketing definition of that. But, taking a closer look, what does that mean? That means really coordinating to create a, and this is the hardest part, we're going to reiterate this throughout, but security is very much a shared responsibility and a cultural change that is kind of hard to get your head around at first. And that's where, at the outset, most organizations really have to clear that hurdle and start thinking, okay, how do we all work together and collaborate for the purpose of creating and delivering more secure software? And so as your collection of application security test solutions comes into play, you're going to want to figure out, okay, how do I test for all vulnerabilities, known vulnerabilities earlier in my pipeline? And that's something to ultimately be figured out. You don't want to have your developers have, that kind of burden of just being thrown a whole collection of scanner output data and having to sort it through themselves. So it stands to reason that, the better that you integrate application security tests throughout your pipelines, and the more you can process that output data in a way that makes a developer, it just makes their life so much easier. They should look and have some kind of guidance as to, how do I remediate these vulnerabilities? We clearly know what they are. If they're prioritized and I have some guidance, well, it becomes very easy for me to just go back and quickly make a fix versus having to sort through all kinds of different scanner output from a variety of tests and then having to make sense of that. So, these are proven ways that you can actually accelerate your, I would say the feedback loop and shorten the time to resolution for known vulnerabilities here. And I mean, this is an immediate benefit of shift left. On the topic of benefits, it stands to reason that, you're going to see a overall lower cost in terms of resources and the effort of remediation, fixing an issue early. Let's say you find a known vulnerability through static application security tests, which, something that you would run early on. Well, it it's a lot easier to just go and tweak your code and then and merge that than it would be if you waited till much later on in the process where you've got almost a fully baked application. Then you have to go back and kind of trace that to the trace the vulnerability to the impacted code. Faster time to market. This level of coordination and figuring out how to surface vulnerabilities earlier, well, you have fewer to deal with at the later stages. So there's going to be a much less propensity to be held up against your deadline as you're fixing security issues along the way. And then overall, you're creating and delivering more secure and better software. Again, the more vulnerabilities you find the earlier on, these are all obvious points, but again, immediate benefits of just kind of taking the time to figure out how to coordinate these three stakeholders in better integrating security solutions and practices throughout the pipeline. If you want to look at quantifiable goals, I think it's worthwhile to get your stakeholders together, and again, address where do you want to set your goals in terms of how you're rolling out these new security practices. So, I use the term DevSecOps goals, meaning that, this is a shared goal between your developers, your DevOps teams, and application security engineers. Obviously, you want to decrease the number of security incidents that you find in production applications, decrease the amount of time you spend on audits. You want to increase your deployment frequency. That totally makes sense. You ultimately want to see a decrease in change failure rate. The number of vulnerabilities that actually get deployed to production will go down through these practices. So it's good to kind of set goals along those lines as well. And then how ready are you to resolve a 0-day vulnerability? So everything that we've talked about so far kind of implies known vulnerabilities as you look for CVEs throughout your pipelines. What happens if something is discovered in the wild? Are you in a good position to be able to go and remediate that? And I think that definitely is a centerpiece of Shashank's perspective that he'll share with you, from the cloud. So we talk about the impact on developers, and again, I'll draw your attention to this conceptual graph that I have on the right. It stands to reason that security and compliance, if it's sort of rolled out in a way that doesn't kind of match what how a developer needs to be able to to fulfill their part in this equation, if they don't have the right tools and processes in place, well, their productivity just goes down. The more security and compliance controls that you institute throughout your development pipelines, it's going to be much harder for developers to be productive. They're going to be kind of taken away from their primary tasks and having to focus more and more on vulnerability remediation or even manually processing some of the priorities if you don't have the right tools in place for that. Shift left is, I think that the devil is in the details here. It's one thing to shift security left, but you don't want to shift the mental load and the workload onto developers. You want to kind of give them the information that they need to be able to very quickly remediate any vulnerabilities that are surfaced. And so again, this is where we need to integrate security testing throughout the pipeline. You want to make sure that you have ways to process scanner output, and leave all of the, make this as turnkey for developers as possible. I think that's a really good guiding principle here to shift security information left, but not the workload. And then of course, like if you have any kind of real hair on fire, stop the presses type issues, that just blows everything up. So the more, I would say, the better equipped you are, the better integrated your security practices are throughout the pipeline. And that also includes governance, having the right guardrails in place. We'll get into that in a bit, but make things easier for developers by creating governance that makes it easy for them to do the right things and hard to do the wrong things. And then, that ultimately will kind of reduce the likelihood of any kind of real major issue that you're going to find toward the end of the development lifecycle. So in summary, and again, this is from the build and deploy perspective, culture change is hard, but as much as you can, foster a security-minded approach for all of your DevSecOps stakeholders. So your software developers, DevOps teams, and application security engineers. And in fact, this seems to work best when you have an application security engineer assigned to each application team, if that's entirely possible. You've got somebody who's like a real kind of a security lead, and also the go-to person for any issues, and that really kind of helps this whole process and practice. Reducing toil and mental load for developers, huge, and this is all possible through like a very well thought out approach of integrating security through your pipelines. So that comes down to shifting security information left and not the workload, as I mentioned in the previous slide. And then now have a means of creating guardrails that are effective by way of making it easier for developers to do the right things and hard for them to do the wrong things. So for example, if there's some vulnerability that has surfaced, you clearly don't want let's say a higher critical severity vulnerability to make its way through to like any kind of deployment. So again, there are ways to, you can use policy as code, let's say based on the OPA standard. There are ways to basically do that and to make sure that, for example, if you do have these high severity vulnerabilities, then it'll break your pipeline, and that code won't be promoted to the next phase. All right, so we've talked quite a bit about some of the the guiding principles and the practices, but within the context of the earlier phases of the software development lifecycle. Let's I'm going to hand things over to Shashank, who's going to take you through some really interesting perspectives about what shift left security means and sort of like what do you need to look out for in the cloud. All right, Shashank, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. That was amazing, just covering kind of like the challenges that happen in the development lifecycle and the benefits from shifting left. For anyone that's not familiar with Wiz, we're a cloud security platform that's traditionally focused on securing infrastructure in the cloud. So your virtual machines, your Kubernetes clusters, your containers that are running in production in the cloud. And just this past month, we released a product called Wiz Code, which has enabled us to work with our customers on AppSec and dev teams to kind of enhance their cloud security strategy. So a lot of the learnings that I'm going to go through today come from starting with the cloud security perspective, but then taking those policies and taking those scanners to the left and seeing how that impacts AppSec and dev teams as well. So again, some of the key challenges that we saw a lot of our customers looking to solve, so this is across cloud security, AppSec, and development teams, that kind of made us develop Wiz Code and release it, is the first one is really efficient remediation in code for cloud issues. So a lot of our cloud security teams would find issues in the cloud, but then the next question became, hey, where is this source code even running? Where is the Docker file? Where is the infrastructure as code template located? And then the second question was, who owns that code repository? So identifying and pinpointing the origins of these security risks became very crucial for whoever was the owner for the issues that we found in the cloud to ensure that the remediation was happening swiftly, and it was happening with collaboration, not only from the cloud security team, but then the development team also had the context for, hey, this is exactly where it's happening in the cloud, and the cloud security team knew who was the dev owner as well, right? The second big thing is securing the software development lifecycle overall. Just like Sean was just saying, code, CI/CD pipelines, and any related DevOps processes, they're increasingly becoming a target for attackers, right? So a notable example is the Sisense attack, which began with compromised secrets on a self-hosted GitLab. And taking those secrets, there was a cloud exfiltration. So you can no longer just look at production environments and what's running in your cloud as the only way of an entry point for attackers. Entry points can happen earlier in the life cycle, whether that's secrets, whether that's exposed data within your code repositories, within your infrastructure's code templates, and kind of taking that information and laterally attacking into the cloud. So there's different entry points that really need to be taken account for. And then finally, it's maintaining secure by design processes within development and having context while you're doing that. So to maintain security over time and to maintain it proactively, especially as applications are updated or new ones are deployed, we need to establish guardrails that effectively prioritize cloud issues. So if you have vulnerabilities, if you have exposed secrets, or if you have misconfigurations, it's important to have the cloud context of, is this exposed secret related to a support application that's internal, or is this exposed secret related to an application that's running in production and is actually exposed to the internet and is an external facing application? So having that context enables developers themselves to have the context to prioritize which of the vulnerabilities or the risks or the lists of security issues that they have that they need to solve. So this is almost like the other side of the coin of the first one, which is if you find something in cloud, who's the source code owner? The opposite direction is, hey, if I'm a developer and I receive security issues, I need to understand the cloud context to know how to exactly prioritize this. So again, these are the challenges that we saw across security teams that kind of had us develop Wiz code and is what we released today. And really the way that a lot of our organizations have been able to do this and the outcomes that they've received is twofold. The first is remediation. They've been able to improve their security posture by shifting a lot of the scanners and the policies that we have in production to the left, because now they can quickly identify the root cause of issues, the code repositories, for example, and the risks, and fix them at the source. And the second is prevention. If you're fixing a lot of these issues at the IDE level, at the CI/CD level, at the build level, then there's less and less risk getting into your production environment over time. And there's less of this, hey, there's an issue in production, like Sean said, and now it's going back to the developer. It's actually being fixed up front on the left itself, right? And how we've seen organizations do this successfully is a couple of ways. It always starts with detection. So the first is tying, again, the cloud and the code environments, which is a prerequisite. So if there is anything in production that has a risk, anything that has an issue, identifying the source and detecting and making sure all of those things are matched so that when you see that issue, you have that context. And the second is to ensure that you're looking for more than misconfigurations on the left, right? So looking for your exposed secrets, your sensitive data, more than just vulnerabilities, which is really what traditional AppSec has focused on, is purely looking for vulnerabilities, but there's misconfigurations that can expose your CI runners, your build servers, and your container registries as well. So once you've gone through detection, the next step is all about remediation. And remediation comes down to prioritization. So again, having the context on each of these assets, like code repositories, build pipelines, are these code repositories running real business applications that are important for production, or are they just running internal applications for support teams? Having that context is crucial, right? And then security teams should also consider the full attack paths from code to runtime and correlate these findings across different layers to be able to identify any false positives. And then finally, developers are not security experts, so giving them the context, like understanding how important this application is, or giving them exact remediation steps in order to be able to resolve those issues, goes a long way in kind of bringing the development team and embedding them in the security process. And then finally, once you've detected and you've remediated, it comes down to prevention. So secure code practices should be encouraged at every step of the way in the software development lifecycle. So having these adaptive guardrails and learning from your cloud environment and the context of the code is so that you can reduce the number of findings for developers to review is super key. So I always like to visualize what this might look like. So what I have here is kind of like a traditional AppSec approach and where it falls short. So when you're looking at just vulnerabilities, when you're just looking at the code repositories that these vulnerabilities live on, you're focused on just code scanning and not the CI/CD processes or the SDLC processes, and you don't have the visibility to the cloud environments that it's impacting. So if you just look at the vulnerabilities at the code stage, you're not sure exactly how to prioritize it. And then when you're looking at the CSPM solutions today, you're looking at only the cloud risk and you're not really sure how to tie that back to the code level. So really being able to tie both of these together where you have your context in the cloud of how your production environment is running, what type of vulnerabilities, what type of misconfigurations are there. And then once you see those issues and tying them back to the exact code repository that it's on, the exact owners of that code repository makes that remediation process a lot easier. And then vice versa, if you're a developer and you find any sort of issues within your code repositories, you're able to identify if that's actually running in your production, and you can identify how to prioritize the issues themselves. So that's really what Wiz aims to do, is kind of provide you a unified platform that gives you a holistic security from code to cloud. So the same policies that Wiz is running in the cloud in your production applications for identifying vulnerabilities, identifying any sort of excessive permissions, secrets, those are the same exact policies that we're running on the Wiz code side. So within your IDEs, within your CI/CD pipelines, so you can stop the same exact risk that you would find in production earlier in the process within your SDLC life cycles. And also you can make sure that the cloud security teams, the AppSec teams, and the developers are all looking at the same exact potential issues and the remediation steps because they're using the same frameworks and solutions across the board. So with that, I'll bring Sean back on so we can talk about the key takeaways here.
All right, thanks, Shashank. Yeah, that was some incredible perspective. I think it's not often where you kind of get a more holistic view of sort of the, why do we do what we do at the different stages, and the connectivity between the early stages of build and deploy versus an application running in production. So I think, yeah, in the spirit of tying all of that together, Shashank and I put together a couple of key takeaways. And again, can't understate the importance of these. And they're more just, along the lines of guidelines versus, more prescriptive guidance as to actually how to build the program. But I think, these guiding principles will definitely give you a good start if, let's say, for example, you're in the formative stages of building a DevSecOps program or just moving your security forward and figuring out how to better integrate it as you build applications that are built for the cloud, essentially. Again, security mindset is key. It's not any one person's responsibility, and with DevSecOps, you have a variety. You have three main stakeholders, obviously, but even within those different groups, there are a variety of responsibilities, and everybody's got to work together, but this has to be a shared priority and responsibility. And secondly, where developers are concerned, and this is something that Harness as a software delivery platform really focuses on, is the developer experience. It's absolutely key. You're hiring the best and brightest software developers. You obviously want them to have all of the tools and resources to do their best work to create your next great application. That obviously includes writing more secure code, but anything beyond that, the additional mental load and the toil that often comes with security not being implemented in the best possible way, that translates to a huge workload and burden for a developer, where they're kind of context switching onto basically they have a non-trivial set of tasks that take them away from building code. So when it comes to security, you want to be able to just give them very prescriptive guidance and take all of the guesswork out of what vulnerabilities have to be resolved and remediated first, and give them the tools to do that. Policy as code is something that we offer throughout the Harness platform, based on the OPA standard, and this essentially gives you a means of using a declarative language to create policies around what developers can and can't do, and creating guardrails essentially that, will save you down the road. I use the example first of just like once a high severity or critical severity vulnerability is discovered, then break your pipeline. Don't have that code promoted on to the next phase. So that's just one of many examples of how you can use sort of policy as code to create these guardrails to make it easy to do the right things and tough to do the wrong things. Shashank?
Yeah, and I think two key takeaways for me. I think what we found developing with code is developers really need guardrails and not gates. So how can security just be embedded into the existing workflows? So if you're working in VS Code and you're building your code, how can we immediately have the same issues that we would eventually find in production pop up there? And how can you remediate those issues as quickly as possible there before they ever reach production? So I think within each of those stages where developers are living today, the tools that they're using, the workflows that they're using, how can we present the issue that would eventually come chasing them anyway, but present them earlier in the process? That's the whole goal of providing them guardrails through that whole process, through the SDLC cycle. And then the second one, which I think I've hit home, is prioritizing code risks is difficult without cloud context, right? So a vulnerability is a vulnerability, but if a vulnerability is something that's running in production in your most critical application that all of your customers are dependent on, that's one that requires immediate prioritization. So I think the cloud context of what's actually happening in production with the code base, with the repository that you're working on is crucial for developers to understand. One, why is fixing this exact risk important? And two, like, what is the impact of that? And I think that's generally what we found to be one of the biggest challenges for developers as well, is to answer the question for, in this list of 100 potential security issues we have, why are these the top 5 things that we need to fix? And having the clarity to say, hey, guess what? This is running in production, and this is actually running our most critical application in production, immediately gives them the context that, okay, this is something that's just as critical, if not a little more critical than developing this next feature that we're about to deploy as well.
Yeah, awesome. No, thank you for that. Those are just 5 of many takeaways, but these are the ones that we think will give you the biggest bang for your buck as you kind of set out to to piece together how you're going to institute better, more integrated security throughout your SDLC. What we wanted to do in the final few minutes of this webinar was just to take a brief look at the integration that we've created. So with Harness Security Testing Orchestration and Wiz CLI. So this was something that was completed in early May and announced right before RSA. But the idea was really, how can we, many of our customers were asking about Wiz, given, how innovative it's been as a CNAPP vendor. But we found that, Wiz for infrastructures, code scanning, secret detection, container scanning, and so forth, many of our customers were using this. So we decided to create an integration whereby the Wiz CLI was integrated with Harness STO as a means of being able to orchestrate these type of security tests throughout Harness pipelines with like absolutely minimal configuration. And what Harness provides through this is really the orchestration of those scanners that operate kind of in band, where underneath the hood we can automatically deduplicate and prioritize vulnerabilities. So if you're running a variety of scanners from different vendors and different classes of scanners, then you're going to have the means of basically just reducing alert noise down substantially, and then managing any security exemptions. That those are workflows that we provide to better connect application security practitioners with developers in resolving issues that may not be issues or vice versa. And then providing developers with AI-driven remediation guidance. And I think that's particularly important with scanners that, such as the ones that come from Wiz, the vulnerability intelligence, the quality of that information is really high, which is great because it provides a ton of context for both the security teams and developers around CVEs. And so taking that a step further, giving a set of guidelines as to, how do I quickly remediate this? Where do I need to look, and what is the recommended remediation path? So we provide that as well.
Yeah, and really big for Wiz as well, because a lot of our, there's a lot of our customers that also use Harness. And so when we released this integration, it became, again, one of these things where a lot of our customers were able to leverage the integration and figure out these risks earlier in the process and not have to go back after finding them in production and try to fix them earlier on. So thanks for the partnership there, Sean.
Yeah, it's been great. And I think you'll see more from each of us in the near future. Our last slide is just a quick look at the architecture. This is greatly simplified, but you can see here, how we've integrated Wiz CLI, within Harness STO, and some of the key features that I alluded to before are represented here in block diagrams, really across governance, the AI remediation guidance that we provide, and the common dashboards. Again, like a huge part of the advantage of Harness STO, for example, is having a single pane of glass where you're looking at the same information across all of these different constituents, and it makes a huge difference, especially when you have workflows that connect your stakeholders. And that's how really, having a common means of getting things done, and obviously incorporating the scanners of your security team's choice. That really comes in big here. So that's our look at how you can orchestrate security tests throughout your pipeline with Wiz. And with that, thank you so much. Granted, you've taken time out of your busy day to join us, but we encourage you to visit harness.io and wiz.io for more information. It just so happens that Harness has, we're just on the tail end of a series of road shows. This is our annual customer conference called Unscripted. We have one more event, which is virtual. That's going to take place tomorrow, and I highly encourage you to sign up. The virtual Unscripted event is also going to feature one of Wiz's co-founders, Yunan Kostika, with Sid Chowdhury, who's our GM of products here at Harness. They're going to do a deep dive into some of these really interesting security topics as well. So that's a featured session for the event tomorrow.
Love that. And we have the registration link in the handouts tab. So go to the handouts tab right now and click on that registration link. I do also want to say that there is a second handout. There's a solution brief, and we can talk a little bit more about that later, but you might need to refresh to see that one. So if you're not seeing a solution brief in the handouts tab right now, do a quick browser refresh and that'll show up. I won't say anything interesting for the next 10 seconds while you all refresh. I'll be very boring. So refresh now and then, okay, now come back, because now we're going to say exciting things. And what we're going to do is talk with all of you out there, because we've got some wonderful questions coming in, and I want to dive into some audience Q&A. Shashank and Sean, thank you so much for a fascinating conversation. Are you ready to get grilled?
Bring it on.
Let's do it. All right, audience, you heard them. Bring it on. So keep those questions coming in. I'm going to start out with this one here because Richard has written us a nice long question, and this is kind of maybe more of a thought-provoking question and a little bit of best practice, I'm thinking as well. We talked a lot about the human element. And Sean, you really hit on needing to create this security mindset. And there's kind of multiple pieces to that security mindset. One is really needing to use the correct tools, but then you can possibly create a system where you're now over dependent on the tools. And so there's a lot of psychology here. So maybe what we'll ask you to do is put on your psychologist hats, but also to maybe give us some best practice or if you've seen real world examples of this. So Richard says shift left is an insurance policy and a good one. But like any insurance, someone will ask, why am I paying for for this if nothing bad has ever happened to me. Shift left checks need to be painless to get dev buy-in. But on the other hand, how do you keep complacency and overdependence on shift left tools from setting in and keep devs on their toes, proactively doing secure by design dev work? What do you think, guys?
No, that I think, yeah, it's a great question, but also phrased in a way that, like, I get that you really get that it's not a, it doesn't automatically solve all your problems in sort of the, the blink of an eye or the wave of a wand, if you will, yes. Keeping with the theme.
Nice. Nice.
As I was listening to the question, I was thinking, okay, yeah, there's definitely, it's a process of constant learning. And so, the secure by design, that's a great place to start, at least as far as like how you keep your developers training up new skills or just strengthening the existing ones that they have. I think they're probably always going to be new practices sort of within that whole secure by design. If you want to call it a practice in itself, but yeah, complacency is always a big risk. And I think, culture is something that changes and it obviously has to change around, new tools and technologies and maybe even new types of software. One of the topics that I see come up more frequently now is like, hey, how do I secure an AI application? I mean, this is the next frontier. Everybody's building for AI. So, and I don't want to mislead you in that I have an answer to that, but it stands to reason that, there is a way to kind of maybe come up with a different game plan, do all of the things that you're currently doing with shift left security, but are there different areas of focus where that you're going to have to tackle some bigger security hurdles at a certain point? Mm-hmm. Shashank, you have some perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think it's relative. From what I've seen, nobody likes to make mistakes, right? Like, no person wants to build something, do something that is eventually going to be useless or be bad or come back as a bug or an error, right? So I think personally, the way to keep developers on their toes is to present them with the errors in the context that they already live in, right? So again, if you're developing in your VS Code, you're building your code, you're normally getting your errors, why not attach the security and the vulnerability information right there? And no developer is going to look at that and say, I'm just going to keep going, right? It's something that they're going to want to fix in the moment. So for me personally, I think it is the best way. And there is kind of like an inherent incentive there as well, because especially over time, the developer will start seeing less and less security issues coming to them because they're fixing them before they actually even reach production. So I think that requires kind of a long tail of like buying in and getting into the process, which then is like more of that, cultural conversion that takes time as well.
Yeah, it's I was going to add one more thing. I think, Shashank, you alluded to like the number of vulnerabilities that you're going to see at a certain stage will go down. And, we talked a little bit about some top line metrics. And again, just because you've done all the, the sort of the best practices in shift left security and you've implemented those, it's not so much I guess, cause and effect is all relative, right? I mean, that's going to help you, trend in the right directions for a lot of these metrics, like the number of vulnerabilities found in production, your time to remediation, that sort of thing. I think that's probably a good way to keep tabs on how's it going. And of course, there's so many underlying, there are a lot of moving parts to this whole thing. And so, you can fix individual ones that where it's obviously you need to do better, but I think those metrics will kind of keep everything going in the right direction.
I like that. And I think a lot of what we're hearing from this is that sort of, again, not an easy answer, not a magic wand, but iterative process. and continual learning, and not just because there's always new wonderful partnerships and tools coming to the market, as you guys are demonstrating for us here today, but because our entire world context changes so rapidly these days, and we sort of need to be adapting and adjusting to that. So there's a need for sort of adaptivity and flexibility as you're going. And it sounds like we get a lot of that with what you guys have brought to us today. There's the option to kind of grow and be flexible, which is huge. And I want to shift into another couple of questions that we got around governance policies. And I think we sort of brushed against that, but I'm wondering maybe if I could ask you guys to give us a little bit of a deeper dive in the few minutes that we have. We got about 10 minutes that we've got left here to kind of dig in a little bit to what you would suggest folks out there have in place in their governance policies.
I'll just quickly mention, there are some, it all depends on the platform that your developers are using. Sometimes a bunch of like out of the box policies, there tends to be, so I've had a little time in the sort of the cloud native authorization space where, policy as code can be applied to like all these different levels of the stack. And, you obviously have, policy authors can be technical or non-technical. Sometimes you have somebody from the compliance office that is not, not a great coder. And so, they would want to build a policy out of natural language. I think policy as code offers the flexibility just in terms of the type of policies that you want to be able to enforce throughout your pipeline, which is great. But it also, like, there are means for the the person who has to enforce the policy and then the person who's going to author it and sort of like put it into action to collaborate and figure out how to do that. So, that's sort of I think the recommended practice. I mean, working with an out of the box policy is great, but that may limit you to only a handful where you'd want to customize this further based on the regulatory compliance, let's say, or the, internal policies that are important to your organization.
Perfect. Shashank, anything you want to do? Yeah, go ahead.
I think just one quick thing to add. I think for governance and compliance specifically, I think SBOM is also a pretty critical part of kind of the dev tool cycle. So understanding everything, all the inventorying of all the packages, all the software that's kind of running in your applications is critical, because that's something that you're going to be asked at some point. So I think making sure that you have that inventorying of everything that's running in your system for your applications is very critical.
Yeah. Well, these are some great tips. I'm going to start to kind of wrap things up a little bit. And I think you guys did a great job of summarizing your key thoughts and final takeaways. So, we've certainly kind of hit on some things that I think will stay with the audience as they walk away. But I'm wondering if there was a way that you would like to see everyone in the audience sort of action some of what they've learned, whether that's, go read this or book a demo with this, or spend some time, take, audit your internal systems, whatever it is that they could actually take away and maybe start actioning in their lives. I'm wondering what you would suggest is sort of a key next step. And maybe Sean, I can ask you to start that out again, and then Shashank.
I would say there's a wealth of resources out there. Some really great security blogs. I think Shift Left and DevSecOps and sort of this model is there are so many common initiatives to stakeholders who are in completely different organizations and different roles. So I think, beyond all of the resources and information that you can consume, how do I do this, and this, for example, like, go spend some time with somebody in one of those other teams. If you're a developer, spend a little time with an application security engineer. Like, kind of like, I don't want to say bring your kid to work day, but like, go spend an hour or two,
make
like
friends.
With that person. Yeah. I think, I don't mean to make a joke out of it, but I do think that there's like, it can be very eye-opening when you understand a problem from your fellow stakeholders' perspective who works in a completely different function. And then, you can really piece together that whole context. Just by example here, I am like primarily focused on, build and deploy security practices, but working with Shashank on this whole, bringing in that whole perspective from the cloud. What do we do when we find vulnerability in the cloud and application? Like what is the implication further upstream? And so just having that different perspective, I think, is going to make for a better overall practice. And then, you can figure out the how-to stuff. As I mentioned, there's just an overwhelming amount of material out there on the subject.
Yeah, Sean literally took my answer. I think I think spending time with each of these teams, I think is very critical. But I think also going in with very clear questions that you want to ask and the context that you want to receive from these teams is very important. So if you're a cloud security team, I think it's asking, hey, is there a reason in the past month we've sent 100 issues that are related to applications and really only 10 of them have been resolved? And actually the ones that we consider to be the most critical have not been resolved at all, right? And maybe there's a disconnect of the type of information the cloud security team is passing on to the app security team. So they don't even understand that I didn't even know that those were your 10 most critical issues that I should be fixing this month, right? And vice versa for the AppSec team, in the same way, to talk to the development team and say, hey, I put this on your Jira board, but you seem to continue to, blow through these features, but there are these security issues that the cloud security team is hounding me on because these things exist in production. So I think kind of figuring out where are those gaps of information, and then I think going out to look for what tools enable me to get that context that can provide the context for all of these folks to kind of be on the same page. I think having those conversations is key. So Sean did take my answer for sure.
Well, you guys, that's just how good your partnership is. And I think that's a great place to sort of wrap up our conversation today. Although I hate that we have to wrap up our conversation because I really wish we could keep going with this. There's clearly lots more to unpack. And, we talked about this as well. And Sean, you mentioned this. You've done a great job of really opening the door to somebody who's maybe just starting to think about some of these conversations and terms. And there's obviously lots more to dig into and lots more specificity and customization and flexibility and all the things that we need. And so I think, having those next follow-up conversations is part of that. Both of you have kind of hit on this right at the end here, this importance of conversation, of understanding the full breadth and width of the shift here, that it's, technology and mentality and culture and all of these cross sections, which is a really cool Venn diagram, but also complicated. So there are conversations to be had. One option to follow up is to go and attend Unscripted tomorrow. Sean, give us one last sort of description of what they'll get out of that.
Well, if you are any part of the software development lifecycle, be it security or DevOps modernization, developer experience, even cloud cost management, there's a wealth of information coming to you via these sessions that we have set up with DevOps and software development and security leaders from a whole host of great companies. And, I mentioned the session with one of Wiz's co-founders and our product GM. That's going to be really interesting. And, for those of you that attended this, I think you'll kind of want to take a look at this session, which I believe there are a lot of conversation threads. I've seen some of the early video on it. There's a lot of discussion around AI and securing AI applications. What does the future of AppSec look like? So some great perspectives there from two very experienced and interesting folks in the business. So please attend if you can.
Well, that's awesome. And make sure you've got that solution brief, which is going to break down, again, kind of digging into the partnership that we've been able to discuss today, and all the incredible things that are coming out of Sean and Shashank. No, Wiz and Harness, but also Sean and Shashank, single-handedly revolutionizing. I want to remind everyone that we've got the websites up on the screen here, so please do go and spend some time exploring Wiz and Harness. To both of you, Sean and Shashank, thank you so much for being here with us today. This has been such a fun chat. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, and thank you to everyone for taking their time out of their day. Appreciate it.
And to everyone who is asking questions still in the chat window, I do want to remind you all that all of your questions will get sent to the Harness and Wiz team, so you will get answers back, even if we didn't get to you in the live Q&A today. I know we kind of ran out of time at the end there because there was just a lot to cover and a lot to get into. So keep those questions coming in, and we will make sure that you get responses back. All right, well, before we wrap up, I have one more little piece of excitement for all of you, and that is, of course, our prize giveaway. We have a $250 Amazon gift card that is going to someone who is here live, present, and a little bit lucky at the webinar today. And that special someone is Shrutika Salian from Massachusetts. Shrutika Salian from Massachusetts, congratulations to you, Shrutika. As always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after we wrap up the webinar, so stay tuned for that. All right, well, with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to once again thank Harness and Wiz for making this webinar possible, especially to our wonderful speakers, to Sean and Shashank. You have both given us so much to think about today and really led us on an interesting conversation. I feel like we kind of got to explore where you both are passionate and excited, and that is really exciting for all of us. I hope we all got to feel a little more magical today, maybe explored some AppSec wizardry and some truly inspiring and innovative ideas. I clearly need to go watch Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter right now. I'm on a real wizard kick right now. But on that note, speaking of magical, I want to thank all of you for coming and joining us today, truly. And Shashank said this in his wrap up as well. You know, we know how busy you all are, especially if you are in the teams thinking about security. And as we just said, there is no stop. There's no pause button, right? So the fact that you're taking an hour out of your day to hit pause on whatever else is going on and come jump into our discussion is very much appreciated. It is a big deal, and it is part of that lifelong learning process. So we were talking earlier about best practices for creating that security culture that you're looking for in your organization. And this is it right here, is coming and being a part of discussions like this that you can then take to your team and maybe bring some thought-provoking questions to them and some new ideas. And then you kind of take that and roll with it. So thank you very much for joining us here today. It has been such a pleasure chatting with you all. I know that I've absolutely learned a ton, and I hope that you're feeling that way as well. I can't wait to see you all at a webinar again soon. And until then, have an absolutely beautiful end to your day. Thanks all.